りおしまい。
Welcome back, Dragon Ballers, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, L,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. In this episode, as usual, we're talking about Dragon Ball, in particular, episode 82, The Ferocious Beast, InoShikaCho. Is that
Kacho.
right? Kacho.
Or InoShikaCho.
I was saying it right before we started. Now I'm all messing up. InoShikaCho.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. InoShikaCho.
InoShikaCho.
Chichacho. Chicho.
Man, bear,
it's just
pig.
Cheech and Chong, guys.
Yeah.
Like, that's where we're at this point. So, anyways, before we go ahead and get started, if you like what you hear, please give us a like and subscribe on YouTube. We upload Mondays and Thursdays here. And on Rumble, we upload Tuesdays and Fridays. So give us a subscribe and rumble all of our grumbles. Also, one quick thing I do want to mention before we continue is that we likely will have a lapse of 1, maybe 2 episodes going on in the next week or so, but no long hiatus. It's just going to be 1 week. And that's because I am going to be out of town and I won't be able to record. Other than that, anything else you have? Housekeeping stuff, announcements, anything like that, Brock?
No, I don't think so. I think we can get right into this one.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get into it. So, on the road, Goku encounters a family that claims to be fleeing from a beast known as InoShikaCho that is ravaging their village. So, this beast is, and I think you said this too before we started, it's a boar, a butterfly,
and a deer.
And that's where those syllables come from, let's say.
Right, it translates literally to boar, deer, butterfly, or like man, bear, pig.
Right. And so this creature is destroying the village where the family used to reside. And excited at the prospect of fighting a strong monster, Goku rushes off toward the village. Meanwhile, back at Master Roshi's island, Krillin and Yamcha spar. Bulma sees an old picture of Roshi in a book he's reading, and he tells her about a beast named InoShikaCho that he and the crane found when they were young. He tells her that when it became angry, it was uncontrollable. So there's a lot to dissect here. First off, the rising action here, setting up InoShikaCho as something that has been interacted with by Master Roshi, and the crane, which we'll learn more about very shortly, sets up this as something that is is not only integratable but necessary to integrate for Goku.
Yeah, I really like the setup of this episode because of the circumstances of this next tournament, right? And so the first thing that we're really seeing as we're setting up the arc of the tournament, because I would say this is the first episode of us stepping out of the filler territory, right? Because we're immediately introduced to the crane,
I
right?
mean, even though this is technically all filler, yes.
It's
Yes.
technically filler, but I do think that the beast is symbolic in the way that it's been presented here. So it's something that Roshi and the crane found whenever they were young together, and they found it deep in the mountains. And Roshi says that whenever it it had a temper, whenever it would become angry, they couldn't control it. And Bulma asks him where it ended up, and he says, "I don't know. I moved away shortly after that." And so there's a bit of mystery to it, but it's something that is from Roshi's youth. Um, and I like that Bulma sees that the picture of him in the book he's reading, and she points out, "Oh, who's that cute guy?" And Roshi says, "That's me." And she said, "That couldn't possibly be you. He has hair." Roshi says, "I wasn't born bald, you know,"
Right,
which is a
exactly.
funny thing to say, but
It's
it
kind
is
of the impetuousness of youth,
well,
let's say.
it's interesting that they play with that because of the symbol of the asceticism in Roshi, right, where the baldness and having the beard as the opposite of how she cares a lot about Yamcha's hair, for instance, right? And so
Yeah, it
she
makes
can't
him
see
cut it
him
and
in
things
that
like that,
same
yeah.
light, but he looks a lot like Yamcha in the picture, right?
Yeah, he does actually. And a lot like the martial artist in Penguin Village as well, kind of just like the generic martial artist look, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I would say the glasses are kind of a separator because Yamcha doesn't have glasses, but Roshi's already wearing glasses here, right?
Yes. But yeah, it's gonna be hard to get very deep into InoShikaCho until we get all the way through the episode and possibly beyond the episode, just because of his
Well,
relationship to the Crane
and
Hermit.
I'm glad that no spoiler. Well, I guess it's a spoiler. The show's been out for like 30 years. I'm glad that Goku mentions this, at least in the anime, later on in the tournament, so that we can come back to it, and we will come back to it at that point. I think it'll be a good catalyst or cue for us to do so. But right, for now, we have this set up, and we see Crane and Roshi, and we don't really know who Crane is too much yet, but we can assume he was some contemporary of Roshi.
Right. And they're both wearing sunglasses in the picture together, right? They both got the young beast together, and
And
we
it
get a
kind of
little.
sets up that there are multiple spiritual fathers across different plateaus of hierarchy or different hierarchical structures.
Right.
And so we're kind of already first introduced to that idea because that's really what we're going to see in the tournament as well.
Yeah, and especially with it being. Well, we can talk about it whenever we see the real situation with InoShikaCho a little further into this episode.
So let's get on to it then. So back at the village, we're introduced to Tien and Chiaotzu as they hunt and subdue the beast. When the villagers offer thanks, they tell them that all they need is the reward that was promised to them. Tien and Chiaotzu help themselves to some food from the village before departing with InoShikaCho. That night, Goku struggles to catch any fish with his tail and stumbles upon a campsite. Seeing Tien, Chiaotzu, and InoShikaCho sharing food by the fire. When Goku asks them if they're all friends, they tell him that they will have to kill him now that he knows their secret. Tien knocks down a tree that pins Goku to the ground as he is too hungry to fight. That night, Bulma dreams of InoShikaCho running Goku through with its horns, goring him with his horns. Yeah.
Oh man, this is a dense little
So
section.
this section, we're introduced to the nature of Tien and Chiaotzu in this episode, which some people say conflicts with their characterization later on. I think there's some to it there, but it's more it's more of a superficial thing because it's not, or maybe not a superficial thing, but a false dichotomy. Like Tien can be this way and also be the way he is in the tournament without it conflicting with each other. Is
I
what
don't
I'm
think it
trying to say.
conflicts at all, because fundamentally, what we know, with it being a situation where,
Well, Tien being a scammer, right? That's not really. I think that's where people get their conflict about this from.
sure, yeah, well, there's a certain dishonesty attached to what he's doing, but I think that whenever we're getting a little bit deeper into what InoShikaCho really represents, the fact that they're in league with him, and it's something, and it's a beast that the last we see of it in the history, it's with the Crane Hermit, right? And knowing what we do know, which is that Tien is a student of the Crane Hermit, they're traveling here with that beast and manipulating the relationship that this beast has with society for their own gain, right? And so that, I think that's indicative of this, of some of the spirit that they've taken on from the Crane Hermit, which we'll get to later on, right? But it's talking about the beast that they carry around with them that they take advantage of in a sense. And it's funny that we see that they're in league with it at the same time that Goku can't catch any fish with his tail, right? So what's going on in all of these filler episodes? It's fundamentally Goku figuring out his relationship with the world outside of himself. That's why he has to go out into the world, right? And so we see that Goku is not able to get the sustenance with his tail the way that he normally does, which is weird. His tail being his more his not just his monstrous nature, but it ties him back to his more primordial nature, right? And so we had talked a while back about him using his tail to get the wisdom up out of the unconscious, right? So here, that that wisdom's not coming to him, and so he's not able to sustain himself. He has to seek outside of himself to find the sustenance that he needs for whatever the lesson of this episode is going to be, right? That conflicts with, or doesn't conflict with, but it compares to what Tien and Chaozu do, which is they take the food from the village, right? Like when they accomplish subduing the beast, quote unquote, for them, they say, "Well, we just need a reward," and they said, "Oh, we'll take this too," and they take the corn with them, right? And then they're feeding the beast and feeding themselves with the corn, and so there's a comparison there where Goku can't feed himself, and at the same time, Tien and Chaozu are feeding themselves from the
Right,
plate
right,
of
and
the
that
village, right?
works. That works in the context of the episode. I think when we get later on, I'll bring up more of the things that
Yeah,
I think, because I do think that some of the behavior that both of them exhibit in the episode is uh not contradictory, but, and like I said, it's not necessarily something that conflicts with each other, but it's something really not mentioned later on in the characterization of Tien as in this instantiation of him.
Yeah, and that's also because this instantiation of Tien changes pretty quickly as we address his character, so it's not really something that he hangs on to as a character trait, right?
Right, right, right. And that's
Um,
kind of what we'll get into, but I do agree that it works in the context of the episode really well.
yeah, there's I feel like I'm on the edge of understanding exactly what's going on in this episode. One thing we just saw was Goku dragging the tree behind him on the road, walking on his hands. So whenever he has this confrontation with Tien and Chaozu, Tien attacks and knocks down a tree, and Goku has to catch the tree. But he's too tired now, and because he wasn't able to sustain himself and he's hungry, the tree pins him down and he passes out. And so he can't bear the weight of the tree now because he's not able to sustain himself. So
Well, he hasn't made communion, right? He hasn't had communion,
right.
let's say. Yeah.
So
Which is very great that they use fish for that symbology, right? Or symbolism.
and then at the same time, once he's passed out, then we see back here on Roshi's Island, Bulma dreams about Goku being gored by the beast, being defeated by this beast, right? And so being defeated by the beast is not being able to manipulate your bestial nature to get the wisdom that you need from the world, and it overcoming you instead. And that's that bestial nature,
Well,
right?
I want to pause there because I don't think it's just that bestial nature overcoming someone, let's say, but I think it's the realization that the corrupt bargain that's been made between this magical beast and Tien providing them sustenance is almost like a Cain thing where Goku's like, "Is my sacrifice not good enough?" Right? And it's the let's say confrontation of that that's shocking to Goku, knocks him out with the tree, right? Because Goku's
Hmm.
using his tail to try and fish, forthrightly, and Tien and Chiaotzu are eating well, and even InoShikaCho is eating well because of fraudulent actions they've taken, right? And it's almost that,
Like an unholy bargain with their own quote unquote tail,
yeah.
the beastly nature that they're carrying with them while they're going through the world, right?
Hmm.
Because they're traveling from town to town doing things as well as Goku, but what Goku's doing is trying to defeat the beast. What they're doing is they're letting the beast terrorize people and just taking the Pyrrhic victory, or sort of just the earthly rewards
Well,
from it instead of the
it's the
spiritual
idea
rewards.
of it's that manipulation when a person can hold others hostage by things that they themselves can only control. So, like you're saying, letting loose the shadow side, right? And then saying, only I can rein it in, so you better pay me to do it.
Right.
Tien's responsible anyways, so it doesn't matter, right? He's responsible, so he can stop it at a whim. So it is that fraudulent action and that corruption of self-discipline. And that's what we first start seeing with Tien is the corruption of self-discipline, because that's what Goku is kind of all about right now, right? Is learning how to be disciplined on the road of life, not using the Nimbus, etc.
Right. Specifically in relation to the world outside of yourself. Sort
Yes.
of, and that has to do with your image and your identity outside of yourself, right? We had talked a bit about that earlier on, where it's sort of with the naming with Terror and Plague, right? It's sort of, it's who are you to people, right? And they know the name of InoShikaCho, right? They're like, "Oh, he's this horrible, terrible beast." And there's this, they're manipulating the fear that people have of what the beast could do for their own gain. And it's reconciling that.
It's kind of like, using Nazis in an argument, right? Using that fear of the ultimate shadow that can be perceived by the collective unconscious to bludgeon someone into doing what you want them to do.
Right. I like, that's a pretty good analogy for it. It's this situation too where there's a split, because they're hiding the nature of it. They're not coming in as thugs and saying like, "Oh, pay us or we'll let him terrorize the village," right? They're allowing themselves to have a name that they haven't earned, right? Have a status that they haven't earned with their relationship to the world.
Hmm.
Whereas Goku's being forthright and he's trying to feed himself by honest means, and he can't do it here.
Right. And so what gores Goku or runs Goku through is really the idea that the corruption of self-discipline and the integration of one's shadow can be something which sustains a negative spirit
An unhealthy relationship
or an
with
unholy
society.
spirit. Yeah.
Yeah.
There we go. Yeah. Pretty much. So then after Goku is toppled with the tree on top of him, he awakens in the village and meets a young girl named Tanman. After being provided with a meal, Goku says that he will go after Tien and Chiaotzu. On the road, he runs into the same family from earlier, fleeing yet another village for the same reason. Nearby, Tien and Chiaotzu watch as InoShikaCho terrorizes the villagers, discussing their reward. After they've seemingly defeated the beast, Goku arrives and tells the villagers not to pay the duo, as they're in league with InoShikaCho. Tien then tosses a lit torch underneath InoShikaCho's hanging body to prove that he's been killed. Seeing that they're hurting their own friend, Goku frees InoShikaCho and is attacked by the townspeople, and as they now believe Goku is in league with the beast. InoShikaCho begins to rampage, and Goku carries him out of the town, telling him to stop. Tien and Chiaotzu take this opportunity to escape in the chaos. So this is going to reveal some of that, what we were just kind of setting up with the dichotomous nature of what really is happening with the manipulation of InoShikaCho by Tien specifically. So before we get there, though, Tanman, here she is, everyone's favorite character.
Immediately when Goku wakes up here, he hears her voice and he says, "Bulma." Right? So as he's unconscious and Bulma's unconscious dreaming of him, he's thinking of her. And that's that connection that we saw, for instance, at Korin Tower, where
It's the calling out of the masculine to the
that
feminine.
relationship
Yeah.
between Goku and Bulma is still very tightly connected whenever these things are happening. And I love the way that Roshi's island still seems to be this ethereal place. It's almost like it floats in the unconscious, right? And so as these lessons are being learned and Goku gets knocked unconscious, she's always there to be sort of an anchor. And so,
In his unconscious specifically, because
yes,
remember last time he was asleep when he was doing it as well.
exactly. And so they have that sort of connection. And so, yeah, he wakes up and he's awakened by the voice of the feminine, who then nourishes him with a meal. So we come back around through the cycle again, where and this is in the town where Goku had showed up originally, the first town that was swindled
Mm-hmm.
by Tien and Chaozu, and so they're friendly and they nurse Goku back to health in a sense. She, as a representative of them, does it.
Yeah. As the feminine nurturing spirit of the village society itself, let's say.
And so even though Goku is not the hero that saved them from InoShikaCho, he still was fed by them because he needed it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which also goes to show the virtue of the village itself and why it's immoral to swindle them in the first place.
Well, it's to show that Tien and Chaozu didn't need to say, we're helping ourselves to your food, right? They were willing to feed you. So it shows that they're being ungrateful.
That's what I'm saying. Like the
Yeah.
immorality of it is
Yeah.
emphasized by the fact that they're actually a virtuous people.
Right.
Mm-hmm. And so Goku does go after them, and he runs into that same family. They comedically are leaving the town because the InoShikaCho was there as well. He's everywhere.
He came to this next village too because they're just doing a path,
Mm-hmm.
collecting money as they go.
And so we do see them, and then we finally get kind of to the climax of the episode where Goku confronts them as they're trying to collect their reward. And Tien and Chiaotzu have InoShikaCho hung up, seemingly dead, and Goku basically tells the villagers not to pay them. Now, what Tien does here, go ahead.
One thing that does happen right before Tien does what he does is Goku says, "I'll prove it to you," and he goes to tickle InoShikaCho.
Oh,
right?
yes.
And he starts to it seems like he's going to start laughing, and the villagers seem like they've been convinced. And then it's like there's a mean glare from Tien, and then he clamps his mouth shut and then stops giggling, right? He says, "Actually, I'll prove it," and then he tosses the torch underneath him.
The tyrannization of the shadow, right?
Yeah.
Like that it's such self-discipline that it's able to do unholy things to itself in order to preserve that tyrannical nature. And so he tosses that torch underneath InoShikaCho to burn him, and he says basically, or what he's saying there is that his shadow, he can immolate it at will. He can recreate a shadow if he needs to. He has complete control over it, complete domination over it, which is another I think a thing about the gaze, right?
Yeah, it's a negative relationship in contrast to the relationship that Goku figured out whenever he tickled Korin in the tower to grasp.
Right, and
what
it's not
was,
it's not that Goku tyrannizes himself to achieve the discipline he has. Whereas this is that perversion of it that we've been seeing. And so Goku frees the beast because he's gonna just burn to death. So he frees him, and the townspeople are really upset with him. So we kind of have that what do I want to say, kind of a Spider-Man almost effect, where the people don't like the hero because they've been coaxed into thinking he's in league with questionable creatures, and definitely siding with the shadow here amongst what Tien and Chiaotzu seem to represent to the people.
And it's interesting too. The reason that Goku frees InoShikaCho is that he says that he's your friend. How dare you treat your friend like that? But what he's saying is, how dare you tyrannize this aspect of yourself because you need to show it the proper reverence.
Well, it's to say too that that respect and reciprocation should be shown to both the shadow and the more, let's say, waking self.
Well, I guess the way that I should say it is there's tiers of morality here, right? And it's that Goku sees that betrayal of
Yes, the
that spirit as
betrayal.
as more important than the
Then
swindling of
swindling,
the
yeah.
villagers, right?
Which is exactly what I want to get into when we get to the tournament, because this part right here is exactly what Tien should be, and what he is in the tournament in the beginning.
Exactly, yeah. And so Goku immediately calls that out, and he frees InoShikaCho because even though he's been rampaging and attacking all these townspeople, Goku still sees him as worthy of preserving.
Well, he's still part of that natural shadow self that Goku has incorporated so well, and he still has his tail, so he's kind of
Well, he
compelled to
strengthened
do
his
some.
tail,
Yeah,
right? And he talked about strengthening his tail on the road, and this is another step in strengthening that tail, which is figuring out what to do with the fact that you could use it this way.
strengthening his tail. I like that phrase. I like both meanings of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and that kind of brings us to InoShikaCho rampaging through the town, right? After that tyrannical hold is gone, the shadow will react violently. And so, using that chaos, Tien and Chaozu escape. Now, they do this because more or less, they're kind of cutting their losses at this point, and it's something that the pathology that Tien has adopted would kind of guide him towards not taking responsibility for what is happening, or not even seeing the immorality in it.
Now, I do want to point
Or
out here.
actually, I want to say reveling in the immorality in it is what I
Yeah.
should say.
Well, it's very willful with Tien because
Yeah.
from the very beginning, whenever he encountered Goku, he knows that Goku's strong and he respects his fighting techniques. And he says, wow, he has great skills. Right. And so this willfulness here, Tien's not blind to how good Goku is.
In fact,
that
we
makes
should
him
talk about
actually more
Tien's
complex.
sight, right?
Yeah.
Tien has 3 eyes. He has
Right.
awakened his enlightenment, right? It seems as though he is aware of the things that Goku is aware of for the most part. And it's revealed later why that is, but it is true that Tien is able to see Goku's worth and is able to respect his worth and is able to understand that the self-discipline he's adopted is something powerful. What he's not able to understand is the immorality or morality of the actions he's taking because of the frame in which he's been taught, which is all about power, really.
Which is where the Crane Hermit comes in.
And we'll get to that.
And that's why this beast is associated with the Crane
Yes.
Hermit. Right. And so I can't wait to talk more about that once we actually get to the tournament and the third eye.
Yeah, we'll get there very
And
soon.
what's up with Chaozu? Because Chaozu is not a character yet.
He doesn't really do much.
Don't have anything to say about him yet.
Here he is. There he is. So they escape, and the last little bit that happens here is Goku heads towards the first village, hoping to have Tanmen heal the wound that Tien and Chaozu inflicted on InoShikaCho. However, he is met by an angry mob firing guns at him and the beast. Tanmen arrives and tells them that they were tricked by Tien and Chaozu. After being healed by Tanmen, InoShikaCho decides to help train with Goku, as Tanmen says that she heard that the two were going to be entering the Tenkaichi Budokai. And that's where we leave off with this episode. And so here we see that it's kind of almost a scourging of the Shire, like Goku trying to return with the reformed Shadow, but being rejected by the original status quo. And I guess also that process by which Goku has returned the order in the land, it's able to heal the beast that allows him to better himself further. And that's exactly what it does. By wrestling with the shadow, right, one improves their own spirit, not by tyrannizing it, though.
Right, it's a cooperative endeavor that Goku's able to go on with this beast. And he took it away from Tien and Chaozu, right? And so Tien and Chaozu had a lot of potential that they carried around with him, and they didn't use it properly, and they could be strengthening themselves in character for this next test.
Right.
And now Goku has put it in its proper place, and it decides willingly that it wants to spar with Goku and orients itself towards controlling its aggression in that sense that it can be used towards good. And Goku's going to turn that aggression with the Logos into goodness, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think it's a really good. It's not really a bottle episode per se, but it's a really good final episode of the Fortune Teller Baba Saga. We're about to have a time skip, so I think that's
Yeah.
probably why the official thing is there. But I don't have anything else to say.
I just want to point out that I think that the beast is symbolic of what
Oh,
Goku needs to do with strengthening his tail, right? So
hmm
we wrap up this whole arc with him now having a manifestation of that
well,
responsibility to train with as he's going to be
it it
going towards the
it
next tournament, right?
it's really the opportunity to interface with the shadow at will.
Yes.
And that is that interface. And the more that is integrated, the more Goku is able to handle the someone else being able to grasp his full being, which is really what they're doing. They're grasping the tail, right? They're grasping Goku in the context of his ancestry and his bestial nature and primordial form.
The only other thing that I would want to talk about with InoShikaCho is just his form, which is a boar, deer, butterfly beast. It's a threefold beast. It's got wings. It has the
Horns,
antlers,
yep.
the antler horn sort of look to it, and then it's also a boar. I think that it's really appropriate for what it represents in that the butterfly wings are showing that potential of it being something that can be elevated,
The
right?
metamorphosis, yeah.
And something that can help be a bringer of transformation, right? In that sense, it has the ancestral spirit sort of motif with the deer antlers.
Oh, I was thinking that was more of a symbol of maturity because deer only grow those when they're mature, right? And this is something that,
Well,
uh,
maturity and reverence for ancestry are kind of tied into that, right?
yeah, but I mean, like the bestial
Is
part of maturity isn't necessarily reverent towards the ancestral spirit. What I was thinking was that it shows that the maturity that one has to have to interface properly with the shadow in to begin with.
I think that's a good way of putting it. Yeah, but yeah, having the reverence for the maturity itself that you need to adorn
Well, I
yourself with
think
and embody
I
so
think
that
that
you can
comes
interface with it.
from
Yeah.
I think that comes from almost the like inheritance of this down from Crane to Tien and from in a roundabout way Roshi to Goku, right?
Well,
That kind of pays the reverent spirit I think as well.
when we see it originally, it's basically just a little boar, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't have these features, and so now it has sprouted the wings and the
It is
antlers,
metamorphized, yes.
and so now it sort of is this mystical spirit. It's like a forest spirit. They found it in the mountains, and and of course the boar nature being that aggressive, bestial shadow
And
nature,
strong,
right?
yeah. Mhm.
And strong. It's a symbol of strength in that sense. But I like the way that it seems goofy and the title card is goofy, but at the same time, I think that it does represent what he's supposed to be
There
for
is a
Goku.
point to it, definitely. Well, anything else?
No, I think that ties it up nicely.
Yeah, I agree. So if you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe on YouTube. We upload on Mondays and Thursdays, and we've also noticed the fervor by which our viewers are watching our latest episodes, which is kind of strange because they're filler, but we're chill with it. I hope you guys enjoyed this one as well. Um, we have a couple more, and then we're gonna get straight into the tournament. Like I said, we are going to be missing next week's episodes. So just be on the lookout for that, and we will resume those the following week. We also upload to Rumble Tuesdays and Fridays. And I think that's pretty much it. So I'm your host on the left, Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys have a good night.